Change has been the constant for business professionals. How has that affected our confidence level in facing bigger challenges? In previous episodes of our Resilience series, positive psychology practitioner Tara Schofield uses evidence-based positive psychology to help us understand how embracing negative emotions can build resilience. In this episode, we look into using the power of adaptation to balance change when we least expect it. All right, Tara, thank you and welcome to episode 3. Here we are talking about the power of adaptability. And to start off with, we know change is not easy. We love our little comfort zones at times. And so I think to be able to make little progress one step at a time is being adaptable instead of making big changes that we are maybe psychologically not ready for. So why is being adaptable? Why does it make us more resilient?
Oh, thanks for that question. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to looking and unpacking this idea of adaptability. And adaptability, let's kind of look at it at the flip side first of being rigid and not being, and sort of having one way of doing things. Now, often having an area of expertise or doing something really well in an area can work really well for us. Perhaps we're an expert in our field and we kind of know we've got the strategy down pat. We know the standard operating procedures. We can do this. What happens when things change around us? What happens when something like what we've just seen over the last 12 months happens and everything changes and all of a sudden our standard operating procedures are obsolete? That's where something like adaptability has to come in. Now, I want to say that we're not talking, and I think you touched on this in your introduction beautifully, we're not talking about completely changing yourself and having a self-transformation. We're not talking about that. You touched on saying it's like those small things, those small little ways that you can adapt to the situation. So you can still tap into your strengths and what you do well in your world, but just adapting it a little bit so it meets the current situation. So that's kind of what adaptability is tweaking and making little changes so that you can now face a new set of circumstances. Now, just imagine right now we've been going through this huge change in the world. We've heard all kinds of buzzwords like pivoting and uncertainty, and it's even painful to say the words because you're just hearing them so much. Adaptability is being able to look at the situation and sort of say, okay, what have I currently got available to me? But also, is there some slight changes I could make to be able to adapt to this situation even better?
I remember during phase 2 of the COVID situation last year in Singapore, where we can really venture out a little bit more. More shops are open other than the basic functions like supermarkets and so forth. And I was so excited, it was like, yeah, we can get out, let's see what we can do. But after like an hour of being out, I was getting this massive headache of, oh my God, like I've been at home for so long. I think I've lost my stamina and the fear started to creep in. Oh, what if this happens when the borders reopen? And am I ready for it? How am I going to anticipate the change and expectations of what the new world will bring? And so how, with that fear in mind, then how can we become more adaptable to to a future that we don't know what the new future will bring?
Let's almost workshop through it together. Would that be nice if we sort of almost looked at, okay, so the situation was that you'd gone out into Singapore and like you said, you were excited, but you all of a sudden started noticing what we talked about in episode 1 around thinking traps, like a thinking trap of what if this happens and it's terrible and I don't cope later on. So you think that thinking trap came out. Would that be fair? Or do you have other words you give to that thinking trap?
No, I think it's more like certain triggers that we forgot. So for example, I imagine when the borders open and I'm flying to Australia, and then I look at I'm at the airport, but all the shops are closed. And that triggers okay, we are still not in the norm yet.
Right.
So that will start creeping. And then I might lose confidence and say, okay, I have to be quite aware, or the worry could be around, what if I get there and I can't come back to Singapore? So how can I use my adaptability skill sets to help bring me back to the normal level of resilience that I'm used to?
You've already started the first step then, because you've become aware. You've become aware by building that awareness and noticing. You've noticed that you're having this thought. I'm having the thought that I'm thinking, what if this happens? What if that happens? So building awareness is our first step in really building adaptability. And there's really a three-part process that we can look at from there when it comes to understanding how do we work with some of these big thoughts and start to adapt ourselves. And one of them comes from acceptance and commitment, and the work from Russ Harris. And he says it's really a three-part process. Like, notice the thought that's coming in, like you did. What if this happens and I'm really worried and so forth. Notice it, name it. And naming it could almost be like, oh, here comes the what if thought again. And you could almost give it an emoji, or you could almost like, here it comes again. Here comes what if. What if today, thought. And then being able to neutralize it. And what that is almost being able to step away from it and being able to say, I notice I'm having the thought, what if all of this is terrible? What if all of this doesn't go the way, what if this all goes in a terrible way and, the worst case scenario happens? Now, what that does is it separates us out from the thought. So rather than believing we are the thought and that these thoughts are true, we can really believe our thoughts. Our thoughts are very convincing at telling us that they're the truth. But being able to step just that one step away and say, oh, I notice I'm having the thought that, you've opened yourself up with some space. You've actually given yourself this whole new ability to be able to intervene on those thoughts and allow them. Because I don't want to say, just like we talked about in our earlier episodes, Al, was don't say it's not okay to have that feeling. Almost say, oh, here comes the what if thought. And I notice I'm having the thought, what if this goes terrible? And I notice that with that, I'm feeling really fearful. I'm feeling really worried. That makes sense right now.
I was reflecting on what I learned through your coaching. One of the biggest things that I've learned from your coaching is the ability to be open and yet balance that openness with some of the truths that I have full control over.
Okay.
So that means I know that, okay, I'm in a different situation now. The expectations of that particular situation has evolved because of the new future. But what's true to me is I can still do little things that I'm comfortable with, that gives me the confidence to manage change, to be more adaptable. And so what I've done more and more now is to make sure that I don't neglect the little rituals that I have, because those are, I find, really strength building. That reminds me, like, my morning runs, or listening to music, or cooking whenever I can. The little things that still tell me the truth that I am still me, even though I'm adapting.
That's really, and they're so supportive. Those little habits, those daily habits, they're actually effective in a lot of different ways. By keeping your rituals going, like you say, you're returning back to you. You're replenishing yourself. And it sounds like you've got a whole toolkit of ways to replenish yourself, which is fantastic. And what another thing really is you can leverage up from those. You can almost reward yourself. Luckily, things like doing a run can actually already be rewarding in and of itself, because you can get that runner's high, that euphoria that comes over you. Cooking can be another great way to be really reward giving as well. But looking at those little daily habits that are replenishing for you, your listeners are all going to have different ones. There'll be some in there who are almost ready to leave when they hear about running, but there might be other things for them that are really replenishing as well. And finding what works for you. And I love this idea of looking at like little habits, the little things that help you, like while you're making those small changes, what are the little things that you can do? And I think I was sharing a story with you recently about a mindfulness expert who was saying that he'd lost his practice. He had completely lost his practice. He had basically thought, who am I? who am I to be teaching anyone about mindfulness, because I don't do it anymore. I'm an imposter and everybody's going to see me for the fraud I am. And then he thought, well, how do I start again? Because I don't want to be that. And so he just decided with starting with one breath, one action. Taking that one breath was a step towards him getting back into his practice. He wasn't asking himself to go from where he was today to be, a Zen master for 7 hours on top of a mountain. He was just going with one breath. And so it's a matter of sort of recognizing what's your example of the one breath. What would yours be? And you're saying for you, Al, things such as your run and your cooking and it sounds like having the people around you are some of your one breaths. For me, it might be being out in nature is a one breath, getting a cuddle from somebody I love, which we didn't always have available to us during COVID, but some of those small micro connections that can be the one breath for me. And that was something that, like, for my reflection, I found really difficult during COVID when we've all been masked up and sort of closed down, is I was missing out on those little micro moments of connection. And I found that was really depleting me. So I had to find other ways to adapt to that and to find ways to still get micro connections. So they were my one breaths. So it's a matter of finding yours.
I totally agree. And one of the things that I have to stress to our audience here is the fact that, Tara and I, we don't want to take away the stressful impact of not having money. This is not a first world problem per se. This is what we are going through, and what you are going through if you don't have much money now and stress about how I'm going to make the next dollar. That is still very, very important. And when I went through that, and I think in the previous episodes, we talk about sudden loss of identity, because we always associate our success with who we are. And then slowly, as I look at the bank account, it's still red, nothing is doing. And we're just trying, paddling. And suddenly through that journey, the learning journey with you, Tara, I realized that having a sense of purpose really could make us more adaptable. And what do you say to that?
Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful parts of the work that we do, this higher purpose, isn't it? And I'm glad that you enjoyed that as well, Al. Often we see well-being and happiness as kind of coming in two camps. One of them is kind of this hedonic camp, as we have a lot of pleasure and enjoyment and so forth. And another area is this eudaimonic, which is kind of having this higher sense of meaning and purpose. And if we were to tap back into like the ancient Greeks and so forth, we would see that having this higher sense of purpose is a part of what's made humans evolve, and tapping into that can be a really great resource for us when it comes to our resilience. So looking at our sense of purpose and meaning, a way to do that is really being able to answer the question, why do I do what I do? Often we know what we do, and often we know how we do it. But really being able to peel back from that and say, but why do I do what I do, can be a great resource, particularly in challenging times. And sometimes our why is the thing that keeps us going. And there's a famous quote which says, a person can handle any how if they have a why. And that quote came from Viktor Frankl, who was an Auschwitz survivor. So if you have a why, you can get through. So thinking about, how do you find your why? That's a long process. Did you have any insights into that, Al?
Yeah, I think so. I find that, when I hear people describing that they have lost someone recently to death, and many a times, even for my own father who passed away over a decade ago, never once have I heard anyone say that, a person at a deathbed will wish they can send another email. They always say that, I wish I have done certain things that aligns with that purpose and something like that, or whether they have achieved a sense of happiness. So I'm not saying that paying bills is not important. It is very important, and we have to be responsible. But the sense of purpose is not a thought that you can be very definitive at suddenly. It is a journey. It is not an outcome. It is a journey because we are still learning about ourselves. So as we interact socially with one another, like I do with you, it creates more awareness about me. And at the same time, I get to know you. So I think it's really quite mutually beneficial. And that's why this adaptability allow us to be a little bit more open than we are actually emotionally or psychologically prepared for a real change. But by the time the change is there, it's here, like whether we are returning back to work full time or the borders are open, then emotionally and psychologically, we are ready to face that challenge because we have done these work building towards it, and this reflection, we can reflect back because it's a skill set that we learn. It's like riding a bicycle, right? Once we know how to ride a bicycle, you stop riding for 10 years. And when you pick up a bicycle again, yeah, you might be a little bit uncomfortable or uncoordinated the first few seconds, but after a while, the momentum will come. So it's to really bring our foresight to that momentum and not worrying too much about the pickup along the way.
Right. Yeah, really nice. And I love that metaphor of riding the bike as well. And sometimes when we're riding our bike, and kind of to tap onto that, when we're riding our bike, if there's a flat, we kind of know what to do in that situation because we'll have the skills and the resources. What's in your toolkit if you get a flat while you're riding your bike? What's in your toolkit? Is it your different daily habits? What will you have available to you if a flat does come while you've got your momentum? And because you've practiced, when you go to your toolkit, you'll already know how to use it even more. But I do want to reinforce what you said is facing the reality of financial distress and the reality of not knowing what's coming in the future. They're really genuinely big and hard challenges to live with. And within that, what we're not saying, I don't think either of us are trying to say here today, is just be resilient. It's more about, think about some different strategies that might help you while you are facing some of these challenges that could really support you to keep going and keep moving forward, that are genuinely going to be helpful and replenishing for you.
I love that because I truly believe that it is our actions that defines the narrative of who we are and what we go through. And I know this is the last of the 3 episodes that we spend time together to create around resilience, but I'm sure we're going to see more of you in the future. So in closing, tell us a little bit what I love about your belief around full being. I think it's so wholesome. So can you tell us a little bit about that belief that you have?
Oh, thank you, Elle. Yes, I've been working within the science of positive psychology and wellbeing for around a decade now. And the focus has really been for positive psychology is psychology spent a long time looking at ill-being. So let's look at what well-being is and let's understand well-being. And I really pursued that and really loved that, really understanding well-being. Well, ill-being is a part of our human existence. Things happen, life happens, challenges happen. And I felt like it wasn't fully holding the experience of what it's like to be a person in the world today. So I've really taken forth this new idea of calling it full being. To live a full and meaningful life, we really need to be able to experience the peaks and the troughs. We really need to be able to understand and learn from our harder experiences and our great experiences. They're all part of living this human experience. So I really hope that your listeners have an opportunity to really reflect on that there's no such thing as necessarily positive or negative states. It's more all opportunities to learn to live a really full and meaningful life.
Yeah, I am so on that bus of full being. On that note, thank you, Tara, for your time. Thank you so much for contributing to our mental fitness series around resilience, because we're going to need it, because we are all very excited about borders reopening, and hopefully you and I get to have a coffee, whether it's in Melbourne or Singapore, in person, face to face, so we can get to know each other again.
I'd love that. And I am so humbled and so appreciative to be beamed up with all of you. So thank you so much for this invitation.